Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brock Beard from lastcar.info coming at you after the conclusion of probably one of the wildest, if not the wildest race that we have seen this year. And given the year that has led up to this point, that would be saying quite a lot. In fact, the last place battle had direct implications on the playoffs, as it turned out, with a couple of different drivers falling out, as well as drivers losing laps and dropping out of the race at other points. Flat tires abound, and at the very end of it, Chris Buescher, who did miss a race earlier this year at Gateway, Zane Smith had a great run, finishing 17th in his place, came back the next week at Sears Point. We were doing our coverage out there, finished a very close second. Daniel Suarez has been close several times since then. RFK Racing having their best night of the season, really, which is, they've kind of been on and off here really all season, especially after Brad did so well at Daytona and both these drivers swept the duels. But Buescher has now scored, pending post-race inspection, his second career Cup victory, his first since his fog-bound win at Pocono a few years ago, and first win for the 17 team since, 2017 with Ricky Stenhouse. Huge story for him. And first and foremost, congratulations to Chris Buescher on the victory there. Absolutely tremendous for him. First round of the playoffs are now in the books, pending, again, results of the same inspection deal there. And all three races won by non-playoff drivers. So much for having the best 16 drivers that are in the playoffs, or drivers, races, I guess, that are going to be dominated by them. It always seems like drivers making the playoffs or missing it seems to just have a whole degree of separation that kind of keeps them out of victory lane. At least that's what it seems like after all these years. Perhaps that understanding is just not correct, at least now this year, with drivers like Eric Jones, Bubba Wallace, and now Chris Buescher winning the first three rounds of the playoffs here. And we go into Texas and the round of 12 with not exactly sure what we're going to get there. Although, Texas having its own issues there, hard to say one way or the other. So thank you everyone for tuning in tonight. We'll definitely talk about the Cup Series race as well as the Xfinity and the Truck Series races at Bristol. Some great storylines from those races at both ends of the field, frankly. I think we had some kind of interesting stories in both parts of it there. So we'll definitely talk about that tonight. But again, unofficially, Chris Buescher, your race winner over Chase Elliott, William Byron, Christopher Bell, and Kyle Larson, your top five. Ross Chastain in sixth. AJ Allmendinger in seventh. Cole Custer, a hard-fought eighth place finish. And Denny Hamlin in ninth, with Kevin Harvick in 10th there. Absolutely just crazy circumstances here. Not exactly sure where to really start from here. My goodness, I'm actually looking a little further back in the lineup here. Kudos to Cody Ware as well, surviving a lot of the chaos to finish 3 laps down in the 17th position. Fine showing there. I believe that was one of his best runs that he had, other than the Daytona race where the field got cleared out there. Good recovery for him. Corey LaJoie in the 15th spot, 3 laps down there behind some of these other competitors at the same time there. BJ McLeod in 24th. It's not too bad there for that program, especially since they were the last place contender very early in the race here. Oh my goodness. Typically for a lot of these races, I usually start already writing the last car article before the race is over with, just to kind of get a head start on it there. And I feel like it kind of comes together, especially at the races, a lot of long green flag runs. But every once in a blue moon, you get a race like this where not only, even well after Martin Truex Jr., who again is pending results of inspection, is your last place finisher for tonight. Things just kind of kept happening, and you had a lot of big names that were dropping to the back of the field there along with him. The added intrigue about what may or may not be happening with the Toyota teams, with both the 2311 cars both having issues with power steering similar to Truex, but apparently not as severe in their cases there. The 23 and the 45 coming back out there. Ty Gibbs coming within about 4 laps of catching Kyle Busch for position, and within 5 laps of actually passing him for position before he actually dropped out of the race. It ultimately still dropped him to 34th because Ryan Blaney was still running at that point after spending, he was 162 laps down at the finish in 30th place. Still got to climb past not only Kyle Busch, but also the drivers eliminated in the biggest wreck of the day between Austin Dillon, Alex Bowman, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Further back in the lineup there. It really was. It was interesting and it was entertaining at the same time to actually see every once in a while, again, battles in the garage area and cars coming back out of the garage area having a direct role of it. It's so rare these days, not only with the short fields, but with the crash clock at the same time. But to see these mechanical issues here, and again, a whole new spat of them that we haven't really seen. Kudos to USA for finally showing us how the steering system on these cars actually works. It only took them until September to actually manage to do that. But that ended up being absolutely critical to understanding what on earth was going on with the 23, the 45, and the 19 during the this whole part of the race here. Again, information that we should have been aware of quite a while ago. NASCAR, I think, is still going to have a very difficult week here ahead as they're going there. They, after the Darlington situation with Kevin Harvick and the changes that were made to respond to the fire that was in his car after the other fires that happened earlier this year, what on earth are they going to do to figure out why you had all these right front tire failures, why you had these power steering issues? Obviously, we don't have a spring race at the same Bristol because of the dirt race here. I'm sure that's going to be the first explanation. In fact, it seemed like there was a little bit of PR work being done from the booth there. But what exactly is going to be learned from this to apply to the cars going forward? And is this going to be a problem at some of the tracks that we have remaining on this schedule? We just have Martinsville much later on here, but is this potentially an issue that we're going to see at a place like Phoenix, for example, for the championship? We did see Corey LaJoie have that bit of a hit on the back straightaway that dropped him into last place in that race there. Was that a precursor to what we saw here? Or was that something else? Seemed like it was more of a right front issue and perhaps even an issue with the rim in that particular case, but hard to really say. Yeah, I think it was very interesting. And one thing I will give NASCAR big kudos for was, again, making the cameras, the onboard cameras, available for all the teams in the field. This was an absolute perfect race to feature that format there. And you really, I think, and I'm sure it wasn't the only one, looking at a lot of these teams, especially when big teams like Ryan Blaney's are spending several laps behind the wall, or Ty Gibbs and Bubba Wallace, back there. And then drivers like Alex Bowman and Kyle Busch just having even more catastrophic situations that just end up, having the cars go back to the hauler. This, short of actually being at the track, and maybe in some ways actually even, better than even being at the track. Because of course, sometimes when I'm there, there's cars coming, left, right, and center, and it's hard to keep track of who's going where and what the implications are. I thought that was extremely helpful in this. And I think as a positive to look forward on, again, hopefully this is something that's going to stay on next year, including for the Fox portion of the schedule next season, and hopefully become something that they look at for the other divisions as well. If we can't have race view, this is definitely the next best thing. I couldn't tell if the camera angle was improved any. It seemed like I could get a better view of the cars on the track. I don't know how much of that was the track itself versus a change in position of the cameras, but it seemed like they were much more useful in this race than they had been at Kansas last week. So yeah, definitely a positive on that end. Ended up having to pull up so many different windows between Blaney's and Ty Gibbs and Bubba Wallace's and others there that it ended up having so much noise. It was actually kind of hard to hear the garage reports there, although it did hear the one for Truex being out of the race with the steering issue there. It's going to be interesting. I think the steering issue is going to get some of the focus, but I think this whole right front tire failure issue is going to kind of steal the show at the same time there. But that's going to be, that'll be a whole other story here at the same time. But, very, very interesting. Interesting. Not to say that there's any negative aspects of this race here at the same time, but I think, there's definitely a lot to look at. There's definitely a lot to digest. And I think that certainly coming after, I was kind of the beginning of my thought here, after the Darlington situation with Kevin Harvick, this is not exactly a race that overcame the crappy cars, crappy parts allegations from that and what happened from there. Whatever changes were made, thankfully we didn't see really fires in the cars, but we saw cars literally just falling apart. And I'm of two minds of this because I think on the one hand, that's always been an aspect of NASCAR as far back as you can go. If you watch the 1994 spring race at Bristol, you had a lot of accidents, but also a ton of mechanical failures in that one. It resulted in a very tattered field with very few cars on the lead lap, and it was simply just a matter of survival. And there was a time even in the sport not far before that where pretty much every race on the schedule was a result of that. What complicates things now is that this is a spec car, and that the NASCAR teams are really have their kind of hand, like one hand tied behind their back to an extent, because there's not much they can do to innovate things. They have to literally just put them together and kind of hope for the best. So if you have a universal failure that's showing up multiple times, it used to be kind of viewed as like a coincidence or maybe just a bad part. Hendrick Motorsports had this happen at Talladega in 2002, where all the engines for all four of their cars, plus the ones they leased over to MB2 Motorsports, all blew up in the same race. I believe in that case, it was related to one common part. They got a bad batch of them or something. And there's been other examples of this also along the way. But when you have a spec car that NASCAR has put together and they're not allowing the teams to come up with the parts. I mean, again, I think Kevin Harvick had that other interview going into the Kansas race before qualifying and was very outspoken about that too, talking about the fact that the teams have the equipment. They can help make these cars better. They just need NASCAR to kind of loosen things up a little bit and allow them to do that and allow them to come up with these changes, because the process that happens in NASCAR itself is way slower than what can happen at the teams when the teams are working on this every day of the week, hours on end, and have, certainly more staff if you combine all the different teams together and understand that they're all kind of working together on the same issue. That's, I think, been probably the biggest adjustment that a lot of these teams and drivers have had to figure out. And unfortunately, it's resulted in races like this where you see several drivers and teams having the same problems or very similar problems. Or, now we're seeing that, that there's certain tracks that bring these up more than others. There's probably been other examples of it this season that just haven't been quite to this level. But today we saw just such a sizable portion of the field, playoff guys, non-playoff guys, everybody in between, always affected by this. And I think that's going to highlight the need for some kind of collaborative effort between the teams and NASCAR themselves. And I hope that's something that they come to a realization on. I don't know what the answer is, because it's going to change a little bit of their NASCAR's outlook here of creating a spec car that they have 100% of the control of. But I think that would be another part to look at there too. But kind of a crazy situation there. Also, again, and kind of on the broadcast side of it here, one thing that kind of stood out to me a little bit at the end. Now I get there's the challenges we talked about a little bit about from NASCAR's side, and there's also the challenges from the broadcasting side. When you have a great deal of things that are happening, and it's like, this guy's dropping out, this guy's dropping out, this guy's coming back on the track, and things that usually they don't focus on, but when it gets to the playoffs, every one of those little moments is absolutely critical. Things are going to kind of slip through the cracks, and you can't catch everything at that moment. I still think that I don't like to lean into that excuse too much with these networks, because again, they have all the money, all the resources, and if they need to get more people out there to do stuff, they can do that. But in this particular case, like Joey Logano's problem at the end, he had a flat tire. He may or may not have gotten the wall, and he comes down pit road, and Steve Letarte very casually is just like, oh, well, look, he's making up some laps. Austin Cindric's making up some laps on Logano. And I'm like, what? And they just kind of go back to the restart and just kind of don't mention anything about it until Logano's behind the wall well after. It's like, well, wait, hang on. Like, it's like, that's not a small thing here. I mean, are we going to talk about itchy arms and things of that nature from 2013? I mean, people have forgotten about that so easily. Now, I think in this particular case, and again, I was glad to see it from the onboard cameras, they cleared up that apparently it was some issue with the toe link on Logano's car, like we saw with his teammate Ryan Blaney. And much like Blaney, they couldn't get the actual part reattached, and they went back behind the wall to complete the repairs. In fact, they pulled up to the exact same toolbox that they pulled Ryan Blaney's car up to. to actually complete those repairs. It just so happened that it was 31 laps to go. There was no way on earth that they were going to complete 120, 130 lap repair in that time and get him back out there. So, of course, their day was done. Yes, the net effect was that it put Austin Cindric ahead of Kyle Busch in there. But the problem I had with the way that they expressed it and not following up on the story, at least not very clearly, is they kind of put out there that kind of appearance of impropriety. Now, maybe if there was something else going on out there, I don't know, again, and if it could be that we find out more information on that. But that seemed to be the indication from the onboard camera and listening to the radio, both of which they absolutely should have had. So, and I feel a little bad jumping on that with the meme there when Steve Letarte said, oh, well, he just made up those laps. I was kind of more like, what the heck? You kind of want to look into that a little bit more. And certainly, when you have the tools here and you kind of find that out, it's like, oh, okay. And then I was posting about that. It's like, look, they're working on this and that's kind of the situation. I have a feeling that there's probably going to be there's going to be countless articles that are going to be questioning about what the legitimacy of that was. Was there an effort there consciously to try to make sure Cindric made the championship and joined all three of the Penske cars? Kind of seemed like it a little bit from Austin Cindric's interview. But, again, I'm not sure if that's a can of worms that necessarily needs to be opened. Now, at the same time, there was also a lot of discussion about team orders, or specifically manufacturer team orders. We don't see this in NASCAR. For those of you that are much more Formula One fans, it's not a typical situation where you're going to hear somebody on the radio say, hey, we really need a caution right now, or we really need this to happen, or you better let that guy go by. I'm sure there have been examples of it further back. Certainly in the Buddy Arrington video, if you recall, there were certainly allegations of that when Buddy was driving Dodge equipment for Richard Petty and receiving receiving the assistance from that team there and understanding what the nature of that was. Certainly the example of the Dover incident where he spins out and then doesn't draw a caution, comes back out and then stalls on the track. It always raises eyebrows in those cases. In this particular case here, we have the situation with 2311 with the power steering issue that was suffered at the exact same time by Martin Truex and put the 19, the 45, and the 23 behind the wall. Now, in the case of Truex's, at least from what we saw from the broadcast here, they seem to delineate the problem with 19 versus the 45 and the 23, saying that the seal had actually failed on the power steering system and that he couldn't get back out there. Whereas with the 45 and the 23, they were able to make some repairs. Specifically with Bubba Wallace, they actually sent him back out there to get some more laps, and then he came back in, which kind of had the advantage over the 23 there at the time. And then they actually replaced that entire rack, that entire steering rack in the front of the car. Something we haven't really seen too much of. It seems like usually when the steering locks up on these cars, they're just done for the day. Teams like BJ McLeod's have had this issue already earlier this season. So it's not something too unusual there. But in this particular case, the 45 and the 23 are both behind Kyle Busch, whose engine just completely hand grenades. I mean, what the hell is going on with that too? I mean, he has this engine failure at Darlington, and then he has another one in this, and just has a catastrophically terrible first round in the playoffs here. Kind of just a really bizarre situation. I can't think of any time that Kyle Busch has had two engine failures that close together. It seems like, especially out of Joe Gibbs Racing here. And trying to figure all that out. But regardless, Kyle Busch is out of the race. Truex is out of the race. The 23 and the 45 passed the 19. Ryan Blaney, after his earlier suspension issues, after his car is dragging debris around the track, he finally gets around Truex, drops him to last place. And now you suddenly have three cars that are working their way up the pack. And the next ones in line are going to be Kyle Busch. And then after that, the three cars that were wrecked, Stenhouse and Bowman and those guys that are right in front of Kyle Busch, because that wreck happened pretty much on the restart after Kyle's engine failure. So you have not just one spot, but multiple spots that these cars can actually catch. Bubba Wallace, for example, I think he cleared pretty much all of them here. Let me look at the results again. Where did he actually end up? He was finishing in the 29th spot. So yeah, so he passed Dillon, Bowman, and Stenhouse, and he also at the same time kept his 70 lap advantage over Ryan Blaney. So Blaney couldn't get around him. So 29th place finish. despite being 92 laps in the garage area there. A big recovery there. So, of course, a lot of discussion already began in this race and online, of course, too. It's like, well, why would 2311 get back out? Why are they going to do that? It's going to make it harder for Kyle Busch to make it in. And okay, yeah, Kyle Busch is, he's what, 2 or 3 points above the bubble, and then suddenly it's like 2 points, and it's getting down even lower. He wouldn't have been in that position if he hadn't lost the engine. If he had even a mid-pack finish, he probably in this race would have been able to kind of hang in there. But it just so happened that a lot of these teams had failures that weren't necessarily terminal. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, teams like BJ McLeod have had issues with steering, and maybe they couldn't either afford to replace the steering rack or they didn't have enough time in the race. Remember, a lot of these particular issues we saw tonight with the 12, the 45, and the 23 happened in the first half of the race. And the pace was so slow in this one, it seemed, that we had just enough incidents and just enough cautions coming out that it seemed like there was plenty enough time. I mean, you can't, it's not like the haulers can leave early. They got to drive over the banking and go out the exit, just like it had, for years there. So there's, you can load your equipment up earlier, like with Truex and so forth, but you're not exactly going to beat the traffic. So that's not really going to be an issue. It's very different from a track like, say, Kansas last week, where you saw Kevin Harvick's equipment loaded up about 90 laps into the race. And when the checkered flag falls, he's long gone and they're, halfway back to Charlotte. But maybe that's a factor in this. Maybe that could be considered. Or, again, Bubba Wallace still going for the Owners' Championship, trying to get as many spots as they could, ultimately did. I think they performed way better than they would have ordinarily with a repair that took as long as it did. Again, replacing that entire steering rack in the front of the car there. I think that was, that definitely could be factored in. It was a little eyebrow raising that Ty Gibbs, when he came within about 4 laps of passing Kyle Busch, which at the time would have dropped him back to about 34th spot ahead of Ryan Blaney and Truex, who was out of the race, although Blaney was about a few laps behind and was closing the gap at the same time. It was interesting that 23 dropped out at that time. They basically pulled directly up to the hauler. They plugged the computer into the actual ignition or the thing on the dash there, and they're just downloading the data. The camera turns off at that point, much like what we saw with the race few years ago. Seemed like that's kind of the indicator when the team's out of the race. So that was certainly the case there with the number 23. Could have very easily gained a spot. Could have probably gained the same spots that Bubba Wallace did. Maybe got a 30th place finish instead of finishing, 35th or 34th as a result of this here. Could have been a different outcome there. How much of a difference is that with the charter income and everything? I'm not sure. But obviously there's going to be some question about that in terms of, it's interesting. It's kind of on both sides. There's kind of the indications like, oh, well, he doesn't have anything to gain. Why is he out there? He's going to screw Kyle Busch out of a playoff spot. And it's like, well, if you can run the car, isn't there still the 100% rule in NASCAR? Isn't there still a thing like if the car can run, you want to do the best you can to get the best run out there? Like you're not just going to let somebody by or something. Again, and I know that NASCAR has created so many rules and I'm sure that a lot of them contradict each other. And it wouldn't surprise me if this is another example of that. But again, if they can get back out there and they can get as many laps as they can, or maybe they're even just trying to figure out a different setup that they can run in this race next year, or, whatever the plan is, I don't know. But again, it's fascinating to me because it's an aspect of these races that doesn't get covered at all, outside of my site and a few others here that, when you see people go in and out of the garage area and what they're trying to race for and the consequence of running X number of laps to gain X number of spots. This was definitely an example of it. And it wasn't just Kyle Busch. Again, it was the other drivers that were involved in that wreck. And, if you can gain, 5 spots by running 30 laps at, a minimum speed, I think generally, teams usually go for that. At least traditionally they have. If we've reached a point now in this sport where that's not even attractive anymore, that's another piece of stock car racing's kind of soul that we've lost. So that would be pretty disappointing. I think that, there's probably some explanation there between both what happened with Logano as to Cindric and what happened with 2311 as to Kyle Busch in this case. And ultimately it ended up being that the 23, the Kyle Busch was just barely on the wrong side of the line and Cindric was just barely in. And there were so many other crazy things that were happening. If somebody else had a flat tire or somebody else wrecked, or you had an overtime finish and somebody ran out of gas, I think this was, if you're trying to manipulate an outcome, I think it's probably one of the hardest races to really do it in, because it seemed like just terrible luck was already kind of guiding the hand of most things that were happening there. I'd be disappointed to learn if Toyota was leaning on Ty Gibbs to get out of the race, to make sure that, he didn't pass Kyle Busch and all that. But, as I said online, I think something has to be, at least have some semblance of playing out organically. If we already have, 10-minute crash clocks, and we have the playoffs, and we have stage racing, and everything is diced into smaller and smaller bits, where it's just a game of red light, green light, and we're to the point where the commentators are bored with green flag racing, and they just want a caution to happen. It's like, what the hell are we watching at this point? So I think really, anything that plays out organically, like if it's something like these guys are going to go out there and they're going to try to run as many laps as they can. And if it doesn't help Kyle Busch, well, what's that to them? It makes me really think much more about the Childress announcement. I really thought, and I think we talked about this on the show last week, that Kyle Busch's announcement with whatever team he was going to land at wasn't going to happen until he was eliminated from the championship. I really thought that. So I thought I wasn't expecting to hear anything about that till maybe this week. Obviously, after the engine failure at Darlington and not really setting the world on fire in Kansas, seemed like it was going to be kind of a situation where, okay, maybe it was going to be a difficult race, but not a long shot, with only Christopher Bell locked in, with only a couple of points one way or the other of being in the championship. Certainly wasn't a situation where it's like, oh, well, this is going to be over. But unfortunately, I mean, again, I think probably the thing that does concern me is, again, those engine failures with Kyle Busch. That reminds me so much of Dale Earnhardt Jr. in 2007 when he was driving for DEI and he already had the deal with Hendrick in hand, and then suddenly he's blowing engines left and right. It's not crashes. It's not just poor finishes, not just running mid-pack. It's like literally dropping out at the beginning of the race. Watkins Glen, Phoenix, so many other races he had where he was almost surging into NASCAR championship contention back then. These contract negotiations, they have an effect. It may not be anything deliberate or malicious, but it has an effect. It at least knocks people off their guard. And I think certainly what's been happening, at Richard Childress Racing, has had, some factor with what's going on there with their teams. But, at Joe Gibbs Racing, I don't know. Maybe there's been some distraction or lapse in whatever that's happened there. I think that's the thing that kind of caught my eye more than anything, at least in the Cup race there. But I don't know. It's a bizarre situation there at the same time. Michael Jensen, thank you for the super chat here at the same time. This was this was as old school in NASCAR race as you'll ever see. Parts failures, engine failures, crashes, 2-tire pit strategy, 15th place, 2 laps down. It was fantastic. We might hit 22 or 23 winners. Very possible. Very possible. Truex, Blaney, McDowell, Keselowski, etc. Very possible, Michael. And thank you again for the super chat there. I think, again, the 19 different winners, we've now tied the 2001 mark. I mean, I remember in 2001 where it just seemed like, you just had the most unusual people. You had Robbie Gordon winning and Joe Nemechek and Steve Park, guys that were either just on the ascendancy in 2000 or, people that had been at it for a long time, guys like Ricky Craven and, of course, Michael Waltrip that year. We've seen a little bit of that this year. We've seen drivers that have been bounced around from one place to the other. Chris Buescher falls in that category. Certainly Daniel Suarez and Ross Chastain do. Great storylines across the board. It's unfortunate that it's also against this backdrop of this really problematic car, and these safety concerns, really do need to be treated seriously. And I think we're finally, after what happened at Darlington, at a point where there's at least some notion of a conversation going on, and we're seeing rules updates as they come out, and we're understanding a little bit more about the car. But it's still I'm still dismayed that in this race, it took till now for us to even see what the steering system looked like and what the parts were to make it work. I think NBC should just have a whole show where they just, use that break, a cutaway car and just go through everything, just top to bottom. They must have graphics for any of that. I mean, they certainly didn't put all that together while the steering problems happened here. They had that in their back pocket the whole time. They could have done that the first week of the broadcasts for this part of the schedule. I remember when, you had Larry McReynolds in the early years with Fox working with the cutaway car, or Tim Brewer when he was working with ESPN. It seemed like you would just get so much information from those. And I don't even think 2007 era Tim Brewer ESPN was that good. But one of the few good aspects of it was his kind of hands-on approach of it. They would show him in a room and he'd be there with the car. And you get to literally see the way it worked. And I thought that was great. That would be a whole other thing. But, that's it's bizarre to me that opportunity was not picked up this year, that we've had to kind of understand this car through a lot of like detective work, that we had to kind of just dissect these accidents as they happen and understand and figure out which questions to ask and then not really get the answers. And then finally, the drivers start speaking up here. And I'm sure they've been doing it for a while, but we're starting to get enough of the drivers speaking up, I guess, or speaking loudly enough that now we're kind of getting some of that information. Hopefully we get some more of that there too. But Michael, I agree with your point though. I think in this race here, for any car, for this or any car, this was very much an old school Bristol race, certainly. I mentioned 1994 earlier. That's not the only example of races that just have had tattered fields out there. Not every race is entirely about having just an amazing finish or a last lap pass. It can have just a compelling race because you don't know what's going to happen from one moment to the next. Ideally, you'd feel that every week. Like, I know that you'll have the typical broadcaster will say, oh, this person is the playoff contender and he's expected to, kind of cruise through this race because he won in the last 3 years or something. Or, a driver that, won practice and won the pole, and everybody's going to pick him because, of course, he's the best guy out there. But then you have a race like this and, you can have those elements in there and maybe say, oh, well, these guys won here multiple times. Of course, they'll be great. And then just, they just don't last to the end, or just crazy stuff happens. And that should be one reason that you love racing. It's certainly one reason I enjoy it. I love the fact that I don't know what's going to happen in these races. That's just crazy stuff happens there. Because that's when it's at its best. I think you can really get something that can be very special in that sense. Certainly wouldn't have thought coming back into February, looking at those cars at the parking lot at the Clash of the Coliseum, that 19 of those 36 teams that were lined up there were going to have a win with, still so many other races coming up at the end of this season. So, kind of a crazy situation from there. But yeah, thank you for the super chat there as well. Margin of victory notes sent through on Twitter, Bowser. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for the super chat there as well. I know you were presenting a lot of those statistics last week as well. I'll go ahead and read this on here. The Cup races margin is tied with the 2021 All-Star Open. The Xfinity race ties with the first Cup race at Atlanta this year, and the truck race ties with the Cup fall race at Dover in 2003. So there's your statistics on this. Oh, here's the earlier ones here. The Cup race had a margin of 0.458 seconds, which ranks as the 903rd closest race, the 12th closest Bristol Night race, and the 22nd closest Cup Bristol race. Wow, you really dug deep on these stats here, man. The Xfinity race had a margin of 0.145, 281st closest race, the 7th closest Xfinity race, and the 14th closest Bristol race, and the truck race, 1.152 seconds. Much further back, the 1,661st closest, 8th largest margin of victory at Bristol in the trucks, including the race in 2010 that ended under caution. Wow, man. You should probably consider starting a site of your own, man, because, I think that if you kind of put that to paper and start putting that up there, I think you probably get some attention on that as well. But yeah, crazy situation there in general on this race here. And thank you for providing the statistics and, of course, your super chat there as well. Yeah, so really just a unusual set of circumstances here. And there's a lot of different ways to look at it for sure. Both in, how these teams interact with each other, how NASCAR is or is not learning from these particular incidents and responding to these accidents and stuff that are happening here. And if the teams are going to get a little bit more latitude in improving this car. And then on top of that, the 19 different winners, Chris Buescher breaking through and getting his first win this season, Roush Fenway Keselowski. We haven't really talked about that aspect of it here. the Fenway Keselowski effort here after Brad stepped away. He seemed like he was going to be your winner today. I'll admit, I didn't watch as much of the battle for the lead. I probably watched less of the battle for the lead in this race than any other race in the last 5 years. I was honestly, I didn't really notice that until pretty much after Kyle Busch blew his engine there. I mean, you figure Truex completed almost half distance when he fell out of this race tonight, and there was way more that happened even after that. But Keselowski was leading for a large part of this, battling Kyle Larson for the end of it. It looked like for sure that he was going to bring back the victory there. I mean, you think of the 6 car, you think Mark Martin, you think his 1998 win after he lost his father. Just, a huge history that car number has had at many tracks, and of course at Bristol. And Keselowski tried to get that first win this year. Again, we talked a bit about them sweeping the duels earlier this year. Keselowski himself coming very close to the 500 win, part of that scramble there. But again, having a lot of races where they've been off the pace. But it seems like Buescher has kind of, assumed the mantle of having consistent runs, especially since his runner-up run at Sears Point. That seemed to really light a fire under him, and then pulls off this win here. I mean, it's tremendous for that organization. We could very easily see Keselowski pull off a win in these next few races. I mean, he's no slouch at places like Texas or Homestead or places like that. Certainly the championship intensity is going to be cranked up quite a bit here in these next few rounds. So maybe it's going to be more or less likely, hard to say, but that's going to be another part to really look at there too. But too bad for Keselowski, the flat tire. One of many, many drivers caught up with that during this race, entirely too many. It kind of made me think about old races at Phoenix, where it seemed like melted beads were always the issue, and right front tires and brake heat and situations that you'd have there. I guess you'd see some of that in Martinsville, or you see it on the bias ply tires on the road courses. That would be kind of the difference there. But in this particular case, actually seeing this many flat tires, I guess we've had a good number in a lot of other races this year, but certainly, at a race at Bristol, just an absolute mess in this particular case. So many drivers fell from contention. I mean, Logano's situation, he was on the lead lap when his tires went flat. Keselowski was leading. Christopher Bell had a flat tire. He looked really good. Again, he has just been locked on these last few weeks. Obviously already clinched his spot in the playoffs. Didn't really have anything to really worry about. Pretty much the only driver who didn't in this particular case, but really distinguished himself quite well. So many other drivers just having trouble at the same time there and falling back in the lineup. Bell was competing for the lead when he had his problems. But even then, Bell came back and finished 4th place in this race too. So, very impressive for sure. Then I guess the other aspect too, and I haven't talked about this yet, I don't think, has been the miscues on pit road, or perceived miscues. My goodness, that was a massive part of this. Makes me really wonder what we're going to see when we get even closer to the championship round, and how much more, high intensity these pit stops are going to be. The fact that Joey Logano comes in with a flat tire, they think that they have a missing single lug that's on the ground. I mean, it was the first thought I had too, seeing it on the ground there, but apparently it was a backup one, and the guy was just so fast that he got the new one on there and bolted it on there, but they actually had to drop him back. Other teams not as fortunate. Ryan Blaney with the loose wheel, he just had an absolutely disastrous night in this one. It's a good thing he had a bit more of a cushion, I suppose, to work with there, but he needed every bit of it here for how terrible his race played out. After having the flat tire, the diffuser dragging on the ground, the wheel coming off, everything just went sideways, and that can happen. That's the other part of sports in general and racing in particular. You can just have an absolute nightmare of a race where just everything goes sideways and you just can't seem to do anything right. The 12 team definitely had that happen tonight. I think the one positive they can glean from it is that they climbed out of last place. They spent more than 100 laps fixing what seemed to be the entire right front and right rear suspension to get that car back out there and gain as many spots as they possibly could. So a tremendous recovery for them. I know, the finish that they have, finishing in the 30th spot's probably not going to be too much to really sneeze at. But given how badly how many problems they had, I think that's a very positive look at it there from that. So That's the one advantage, again, with a race like this. And I mentioned this on social media too. It really does feature how hard these teams work and how important that work is. And when they find out that there's not anything they can do, that's an absolute, last ditch effort to actually push that car on the hauler. And I'm glad that hasn't entirely gone away with the crash clock. It used to be years ago, people cutting off fenders and sending cars back out there. I interviewed Jimmy Johnson years ago, and he said the reason that he didn't have any last place finishes, at least until about 2014, 2013 there, was because his crew swung the biggest hammers and grabbed the biggest saws, and they always made sure that he got back out there. And back in that era, that was a time that you still could do that. You think about his crash with Sam Hornish early at Texas in 2009 and destroying the front of the car on the very first lap and then still getting back out there and logging some more laps. It's just a very, it requires a different skill set today. But of course now, this issue with the single lugs and the wheels coming off the cars. We saw this with Kevin Harvick, another huge heartbreak. He was going to be right there with Buescher at the end, and then ultimately has a wheel come off his car at the worst possible time. We could very easily see any of these other rounds determined by such, terrible luck at just the worst possible time, even from teams that are as good as Harvick's. Same thing that could happen at Phoenix. It could be decided on that. It came down to a clutch pit stop by Kyle Larson to beat Martin Truex at Phoenix last year. Is it going to be a matter of doing really, really well on a stop, or is it going to be just the matter of having a catastrophically terrible one with a wheel coming off? And not only do you lose a championship, but you're going to start the next year with a 4-race suspension for those crew chief. At least I would assume that's how that'd play out. It could happen. It could happen. We'll be at Phoenix to find out one way or the other. We're also going to do Las Vegas earlier than that. I'm actually still working on getting the door magnets set up for those, but a lot to really look at there too. We'll get into the Xfinity and truck race in a bit here too. We'll do some more trivia questions as well to kind of wrap up the show. Kind of getting some other looking here, any other points here from the Cup race. Again, a lot of drivers really, survived the attrition to get decent finishes. Talked about Cody Ware, Corey LaJoie, Justin Haley in the 12th spot, finished the last car on the lead lap, right behind Michael McDowell. McDowell, again, another guy that still hasn't won. I know, Michael, I think you were mentioning that as well, of being a potential driver to really break through at the same time. I mean, JJ Yeley getting 23rd. Glad he could bounce back there. I mean, it was disappointing what happened in the Xfinity race where he got that wreck on the back straightaway there. He just got completely run over in that situation, which is unfortunate. Eric Almirola, your pole sitter, was up front here for the start of this race. Seemed like this is going to be a really cool effort for him. Unfortunately, this is a track where he has finished last before. Got caught up by the damaged vehicle policy when he ran the the superhero paint scheme on the number 10 car a few years ago, but ended up dropping out in that one. In this case here, not your last place finisher, but still finishing in 28th there, falling out in the closing stages of this one too. Going to be a lot of red ink at the bottom of this field when the results get finalized here for the back of the field, and we'll certainly find out there. AJ Allmendinger joining his colleague teammate towards the front of the field. 7th place finish for him. Don't usually think of Allmendinger being that good at Bristol. I usually think of him being a bit better at Martinsville. But again, another positives to really look at there too for that effort. But it's amazing that in a race this physical, or a race with this much bad luck, that drivers like, Ross Chastain were able to kind of just navigate their way through, very quietly get a 6th place finish, not have anything too untoward happen, unless I'm completely overlooking something. Definitely correct me if I'm forgetting there. Yeah, absolutely crazy situation here. Seeing the note here on NASCAR.com, Chris Buescher ending a 222 race winless streak for the driver and a 191 race winless streak for Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing, of course, formerly Roush Fenway Racing before that. So again, tremendous effort on that as well. We'll go into the Xfinity race here as well. We'll talk about the Truck Series race too. Brandon Brown, your last place finisher in the Xfinity race. Seemed like kind of a bizarre situation. I got some questions about what exactly caused his wreck on the back straightaway. I haven't seen any clear information on that. Haven't heard back on anything. I did hear on the radio that the team was talking about, maybe the car seemed to spin out on its own. The information I have from that is when the team was really kind of looking over the car and seeing what maybe caused the car to spin out. It didn't sound like they were having any frustrations with any particular driver taking them out, at least from the part of the radio that I listened to on that. Just a bizarre situation and an unfortunate one too. I think the one positive was it allowed in the article there to kind of feature more or less what that driver has gone through really since his win last year, which is not long after his only previous last place finish. Just a crazy set of circumstances here, to the point where the Brandon built motorsports team that he would ordinarily drive for is now in a much worse situation sponsor wise than they even were last year before he won his first race. Just shows how absurd the sport can be sometimes, especially when guys are trying to make ends meet there. Finishing next to last in that one, Sheldon Creed. Boy, I bet he's really happy that Kyle Larson was in that Darlington race. Look, I know that Creed is, really he's such a level-headed guy. And I like from his interviews, no matter how crushing the disappointment is, and, things you usually see drivers like Kyle Busch just be utterly infuriated by, he seems to not let things get to him too much. So I'm certainly not going to be putting words in his mouth. My standpoint is more just from what I'm upset for him in this particular case. He should have had that Darlington win, or had a chance to settle it between himself and Noah Gragson without having to worry about Kyle Larson sticking his nose in there and being a part of that. And it's definitely reaffirmed my frustrations with Cup guys running the lower series, and especially in the Xfinity series. Still working on that article on that. It's on my increasingly massive to-do stack here that I'm still working on. It seems like every race weekend I find another little scrap of information that I feel like needs to kind of be in there too. It presents some other great exhibits for it here, but just heartbreaking for that. I mean, obviously that wasn't the only moment that eliminated him from the championship, but it was absolutely one, that it didn't help. And it was one of the few chances that he really had to really take a win, especially how close to the end of the race it was in that particular case. And again, it's speculative what they could have done further on in the playoffs or anything, but at least have the shot at it there. So it's something else that needs to be looked at. I was reminded so much about, when Kevin Harvick stopped running in the Busch series after he had the wreck with Ross Chastain. When Chastain was trying to lock down that ride with Ganassi, and they had that pointless accident down the back straightaway in that case. I know a lot of people just love that finish with Kyle Larson, and I know the visuals are striking, and everybody's doing the video game move, and ooh, that's crazy. But I think at the end of the day, the net effect of that, I think, far outweighed the positives of that particular finish there. So, again, would Gragson still have beat Creed in that case? Maybe, but at least they would have been able to settle it on the track without having some Cup guy stick their nose in there. And, I'm just not going to change my opinion on that. And that's kind of where I am on that. So you have that situation. Now, in this particular case, Gragson went up there and absolutely took this win too in this Bristol race. He drove through through Ty Gibbs to cause that incident with Sheldon Creed there that knocked both of them out of the race. I think that was just typical Bristol racing there, just a racing deal. But absolutely had to hold off Brandon Jones. Jones is kind of an interesting guy. I think we're kind of starting to figure out a little bit more about his driving style here. You think back to him actually having something to show racing guys like Kyle Busch, even at Phoenix, what was that, a couple years ago there in the 19 car. They put on a great show at the end of this one here. And I had a decent battle there at the same time. But also, again, good finish there for him. Noah Gragson celebrating another win, 3 in a row for him now in the Xfinity series. Just outstanding. He's peaking at exactly the right time going into the playoffs. And then beyond that, locking down the number 42 car at GMS Racing. And of course, Brandon Jones now, who has now secured this past week the ride in the number 9 car at JR Motorsports for next year, which is, I think, caught a lot of people, myself included, kind of flat-footed. But I guess kind of a reunion between the Menards team and, a Chevy program. You think about, of course, Paul Menard's later years driving for Childress, separate program, of course, from JR Motorsports, but there's, kind of a sister Chevrolet team. Maybe I'm reaching too far because, of course, Menards hopped around so many other teams with Paul, like the Yates team and so forth. But another way to kind of look at it there too. Have to give a shout out to Stephen Parsons for finishing in the 8th spot. Great effort for him on that one. Apparently, according to Sebastian LaForge there, Wikiatomo TV on Twitter, apparently that was a former TriStar Motorsports car that Stephen Parsons hustled to the 8th place finish there for Tommy Joe Martin's top 10 run for them. Absolutely outstanding. I think Stefan has had a quietly great summer here between his 12th place run at Watkins Glen. He got to run the North Wilkesboro race there, the late model race with Dale Jr. had a good run out there, and then gets this finish. I think he's really living his best life right now, and couldn't be happier for him. He's a good kid. Also there, speaking of which, Bailey Curry, really excited to see him. Well, I was thinking so much about how exciting it was back in 2020, which I'm sure is a sentence nobody's said of anything really. But the one positive thing, I guess, back in 2020 was on the NASCAR side, the resurgence of Mike Harmon Racing when they had these two young talents in Bailey Curry and Kyle Weatherman. When I believe it was Weatherman got, they get their first top 10 at Kentucky, that both of them are challenging for stage points at points. It's unfortunate that team has kind of struggled since then, but both those drivers have really kind of had, great moments here and there. We talked about Weatherman with his rides with Jesse Iwuji's team. Of course, the top 10 not long ago, the 12th place run at Darlington, some great runs he's had there, great qualifying runs. And Bailey Curry at the same time. JD Motorsports also kind of a similarly stationed team in the rankings there. Been around for a lot longer, different kind of program, but being able to stay out on old tires, held down 3rd place under green for a very long time, it seemed, before he finally faded back to 11th at the end. Great to see him run well, and great to see a legacy sponsor in Alka-Seltzer back out there having a good run. It's only wish that Jimmy Means' team could have qualified. I know Brennan Poole came within just a few thousandths of making the show, which is a heartbreaker. We haven't even seen the 52 team since Martinsville back in the spring, so that was a bit of a difficult situation there. But again, that's where things get challenging on this end. But great job by Parsons, great job by Curry. Jeffrey Earnhardt just behind the 12th spot there for the Sam Hunt effort. Anthony Alfredo with a good run. We mentioned Weatherman, he got 17th actually in that race, just ahead of Sage Karam. Lots of different teams with good runs that, some got more attention than others. Obviously, Justin Allgaier and Noah Gragson battling for the lead for a lot of the race before Allgaier kind of slipped back, kind of dominated that portion of the race there. But again, your last place finisher, Brandon Brown, on that one, his second last place finish and his first since Michigan last year. And also mentioning Stephen Parsons, he actually came back from an unapproved adjustments penalty too. He actually got sent to the very back of the field. I think he was actually trailing the outside line coming to the green flag there. So again, marvelous run there. After qualifying 14th, getting sent back, and then coming back up there to finish 8th. Career run for Stefan there on that one too. Further back, I mentioned J.J. Yaley a little bit earlier. Tough break on his situation there. Got wrecked on the back stretch. Also got spun out, battling C.J. McLaughlin for the lucky dog. That was a rough deal. Landon Castle, got to talk about him too. Just a devastating way to kind of slip out of the playoff contention there. Although there were other situations where it looked like he maybe was going to be able to get the spot from Ryan Sieg, because Sieg was kind of struggling at the end there. Landon had the team had that very similar to kind of what we saw in tonight's race with an actual race from the garage area. In this particular case here, they had to replace the entire spindle on the right front of the car. That ended up taking more than 100 laps. He ends up getting back out there. He climbs past a couple of cars, but unfortunately in this race, the attrition was way lower than what we saw in tonight's race. Unfortunately for him, exactly. He only climbed up to the 35th spot there. But again, I think the colleague team needs to be applauded for how hard they worked to get back out there. They could have very easily just packed up and said, look, that's going to be too much work. We don't have enough time. We can't get back out there. But they threw everything they had to get back in there and give Landon the best chance that he could to make the playoffs. It's unfortunate he didn't win this year so far. He, of course, still has some races left to do it. And hopefully, for his case, maybe the Xfinity series will reflect kind of what we've seen on Cup, where you have some non-playoff guys being able to compete. It's going to be a tough battle with a lot of drivers like, your Ty Gibbs and Noah Gragson and Justin Allgaier and so forth in there. But again, it's going to be, he's definitely a driver that, has had a career year. I think there's been a lot more positives than negatives this season. The runner-up run at Martinsville this spring. We still got, we have another Martinsville race this fall, don't we, for the Xfinity Series? So another way that you can really look at it going forward there for him. But unfortunate that things didn't work out for him. I think he was certainly one of the sentimental favorites for that. The other one, of course, being Ryan Sieg, finishes in the 10th spot, still looking for his first win as well, but now has a chance to not only look for that first win, but as a playoff driver as well. Well-fought battle for him, too. Kudos to him on that, finishing in the 10th spot after qualifying there. That'll be another thing to kind of look at going forward. I think the Xfinity driver that was having the most struggles in yesterday's race had to be Nick Sanchez. Had multiple spins, issues with flat tires. They had wheel spacers that had to get put back on the car there at the same time. Seemed to be losing multiple laps. Ultimately, though, only finished 6 laps down to the race leader and climbed to the 29th place finish. So a real dogged effort to actually get as many spots as he could. I think we've seen a lot of determination from drivers and teams this weekend, and that could certainly needs to be applauded here at the same time. So again, congratulations to Noah Gragson, your winner of the Busch Series race here, the Busch Series, Xfinity Series race on Friday night. And I'm very anxious to get to this here on the Thursday race. How about Ty Majeski? Let's talk about this kid here. I think this is one of the best stories in the Truck Series that has gotten pitifully little attention. And that's something really to be said on this. And I hope that that's changing now with that victory. And I think it's another casualty, I believe, of this just absolutely abysmal Truck Series coverage that we've had, especially this year from Fox Sports 1. They covered this a little bit. They paid some lip service to it, but it absolutely wasn't given the potential that it really needed in this case. Ty Majeski, I think, came up through the ranks about as eagerly anticipated as guys like Joey Logano have in the past, or Kyle Larson or other drivers. Not just, again, in the late model series, being, dominating the ARCA Midwest Tour. That 91 car seemed to be getting a whole lot of attention. I believe Mark Martin was a big supporter of his. Then on top of that, of course, he kind of, brought more attention to iRacing at the same time with the sponsorship and his involvement with that too. Just being a very popular driver and a very, kind of working his way up there. Seemed only a matter of time that he'd actually find some success in NASCAR's top 3 series, but it absolutely did not play out that way. When he got back into the Xfinity Series, he was part of that Roush effort in the 60 car, and unfortunately joined that program at probably the worst possible time. Anybody they put in that car was having just terrible luck. And his teammates were Austin Cindric and Chase Briscoe, who themselves are now Cup Series winners. They're 2 of the 19 we've had this year. And they're drivers that are, now, I guess both of them still in championship contention going into next week's race at Texas. But Majeski, as the least experienced of that group, I think he got kind of the short end of the stick of that. And I think, any of the struggles he had, it just didn't work out. He didn't get up into the Cup Series during that time. So he goes back over into the Truck Series and he drives for Al Neese. He goes out at Daytona, he flips on his roof, and now suddenly he's the guy that flipped over. And he's in a situation like Michael McDowell where he's getting more noticed for a replay than anything else in his career. Forgetting the fact that this kid was part of NASCAR Next, forgetting the part that he was part of the Alan Kulwicki Racing Development Program, and working his way up there as one of the most, and again, I think in any other driver's case where somebody is that highly touted or maybe that highly anticipated, or maybe starts kind of thinking about, how successful they're going to be and just kind of overdrives their headlights maybe and gets in the Cup Series. I'm not saying this of him, but I think other drivers in his position maybe would have been tempted to be in that case. But I think in Majeski's, I think he took the right position. Maybe again from, kind of more of a Mark Martin approach, kind of taking a step back a little bit, getting another championship in the Midwest, kind of getting his feet back under him, kind of remembering, what he enjoyed about it, and working his way back up there. And when an opportunity presented itself last year at the Thor Sport Racing effort, and he got that ride, the number 66, and right off the bat, gets back-to-back top 10 finishes. It's like, it's like a light bulb went off. And even though that wasn't a full-time ride at the time, they kind of just made the most out of what few starts he had and, turned into a full-time effort. He wins the pole at Daytona. He hasn't been worse than 8th in points this entire year. Tracks like Sears Point, where he's never been on, he suddenly just gets like top 5s and top 10s. I think he was top 5 at Sears Point this year, if I remember correctly. Looking at some of these runs, 3rd place in that one. He gets into the playoffs, and now he's suddenly even better. He's starting to lead a whole ton of laps. Like, he's peaking at the absolute best time. So he goes to Bristol, the track where Alan Kulwicki won 2 of his Cup races, the track where, when he was expected to come back as the defending winner in 1993, he sadly lost his life in that plane crash. You got Ty Majeski come out there, and he wins. He wins the race at Bristol and pulls it off in convincing fashion. He goes out there, he does a Polish victory lap, and people are booing him. They are booing him. Sorry to harsh the mic, but I am beside myself about this. What on earth is going on here? They're booing him because he doesn't do a burnout. Are you kidding me? That's so disrespectful. Disrespectful. I don't care. I don't care. These teams, these drivers do not owe tearing up their cars to people. That's absurd. That was absurd. And you know what? These broadcasters, they share the responsibility for that because they're not telling these stories. They're not telling these stories. Oh, they'll talk a little bit about it. It's like, oh yeah, it was kind of a rough road him getting here. No, that's saying the least with Ty Majeski. That story should have been known to everybody in those stands. If that guy didn't want to just drive to victory lane and not see any of the people in the stands, they should have been on his side with that. I'm beside myself about that. I think that was terrible. So, I didn't count on getting this emotional about it, but it's absolutely ridiculous. That was absurd. So, if it's not going to get said on the show and if it's not going to get said on the broadcast here, it's certainly going to get said here. I was very impressed with Ty Majeski's win, and I hope he wins it all. I don't care. I hope he wins it all at the track where Alan Kulwicki won his first race in 1988. How amazing would that be? And those broadcasters are going to have to talk about him a little bit more. How about that, folks? So there's a championship pick you want to kind of look at for November. So that would be another thing there too. And I'm not saying that anybody else here doesn't deserve it. I saw Zane Smith last year when he lost the championship. He was absolutely crushed, and I hope he gets it. Puts a bit of a good battle out there, and I have no doubt he will if he gets to that point. But yeah, I think that story was woefully underrepresented. They should have slowed things down and captured that moment for everything it should have been. They should have done their research. They should have done their historical research, and they should have just jumped right into it. But that was absurd. That was absurd. And again, I don't blame the fans for booing him for not doing the burnout because, they didn't understand. Because the broadcast media didn't do their job. They didn't do their job to make him to make him a sympathetic character. And I'm not saying making this out of whole cloth, but if they feel like it, they can certainly get fans on their side. Look at how much has happened with Carson Hocevar, and he's still looking for his first win. And I'm not saying he's not deserving of it. Absolutely. I mean, when, he broke his, he broke his leg at Gateway, he comes back at Sears Point, wins the pole. I don't think enough was made out of that. But that's kind of another thing to look at too. So again, it matters. It matters. When broadcasting isn't just talking, just like singing isn't just talking, you can't just have the exact same approach you're going to have on like some evening show about oh, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? Oh, I'm going to talk about this. Like, no. Do the play-by-play and explain why what we're seeing is significant. Don't just react to it. Why is what we're seeing significant? It shouldn't be that hard. It shouldn't be that hard. But that was upsetting. That was upsetting. And I kind of, I'm glad I didn't go on social media and really embarrass myself about it because it upset me that night too. And I've still been chewing on it since Thursday night. But yeah, I think that'll be another one to kind of look at there too. So if anybody doesn't follow the truck series that much, I'm not really speaking to you guys in here because of course you guys follow all that stuff too. Anybody who doesn't have a Truck Series guy to pull for, I think they could very easily find somebody with Majeski on that one. So again, these storylines are so important to describing what happens in these races. I think it's absolutely invaluable, and not everybody can do it. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but it is simple. you just got to do it. I think that's what's going to come down to it. So yeah, it needed to be handled differently. When something exceptional happens, or when something momentous happens, it has to be recognized as such and done a different way. Think about that baseball game recently where Timmy Trumpet played the opening for that closer to come out in the Mets game. I mean, that thing has gone viral because the network knew to step aside and not say anything, because the camera crew knew to film it, and they filmed it epic. I know very little about baseball, but I mean, when they're showing him playing the trumpet, and that guy comes out, and you can't see his eyes or under the brim of the hat. That was beautifully done. Like, I don't know if they were, coordinating that or whatever, but it doesn't matter. They nailed that to the point where there's a YouTube video of the production crew doing that. See, people know when the job is done well. You know it when it happens. And that's what needs to happen. That's what NASCAR needs to kind of have. And this isn't the only example of it. But I think really the crowd reaction and the broadcast reaction to it were they're part of the same issue there. So again, I'm much less critical about the crowd if they don't know. Again, people do weird things in ignorance, and that's what I would call that. But again, it's Alan Quickie didn't do burnouts. Alan Quickie did Polish victory laps. This is Bristol. This is where the man died. Okay, can we have a little bit of reverence for this? And again, I know they can't play favorites. I get that. But, again, when it's a big moment, again, I was expecting the fact that, the Zane Smith thing to get mentioned with Chris Buescher tonight. I don't know if it did. I mean, I turned off the broadcast there, so correct me if they did. But they should have, because that was a big moment. But, it's the context that gets people to care. You could have a driver like a Dale Earnhardt come in there, and if you don't chronicle big moments in their career and mention these things and create this mystique of the intimidator, something is missing in that sense. And I think that, I think the reason that there's this perception, and you get some people that are just like, oh, NASCAR's dying, NASCAR's this. No, that's ridiculous. What it is that at worst, the broadcast partners have just kind of lost their way. And in some cases, it's way worse than others. Certainly the Truck Series has been. And it's unfortunate. I don't know how much of it is just time restrictions. I mean, certainly if they were at the track, I'm sure it would have played out differently. That's one part that needs to be looked at. For sure. They should get rid of these doing it remotely things, because something is lost in that sense. Being there and witnessing it is certainly going to play out differently, and it certainly does for the pit reporters. So everything else needs to be, but that's the other part that they need to look at too. So that was unfortunate. That was unfortunate, and I think that's another thing that kind of it's a thing. And I know that, I hate that if, I hate to implicate the crowd in that, but again, I think that's more of a consequence of what information they're being presented. So there's that. So again, kudos to Ty Majeski, long time coming. I know other drivers have gone through way more in their career, but he's gone through this stuff. And you can't just sum it up in 15 seconds during the last lap and say, oh, well, it was kind of difficult for him getting up here. No. That's only the tip of the iceberg, people. There's a little bit more here. You realize how humiliating that would be for any, professional athlete, when you have everybody that's like hyping you up, and you're like going to be the next whatever. And then you get up there and you struggle, and, okay, everybody struggles. Everybody tries to figure this out, but then you struggle within a team that itself is struggling for reasons that have nothing to do with you. And in fact, are also causing your teammates that, of course, got on to bigger and better things. We talked about the pressure that are put on people. We talked about this with the Trackhouse teammates this year. I mean, think of, again, Ross Chastain having that ride at Trackhouse after, working his whole time to get Chip Ganassi's ride all the way to the point where he finally gets it, and then the team shuts down, and now he's got this new venture, and is he going to win with it? And then he wins. He does it, and that's a big story. And then his teammate Suarez, he's like the face of the program, like the whole big part of it. In 2021, he almost wins the Bristol Dirt race. He's like the big the face of the program. And unfortunately, towards the end of the year, I think maybe the team was just trying to get ahead of their next gen program or whatever, but he wasn't as consistent. And then in the first part of the year, his teammates showing him up, and Ross Chastain's getting these wins. And what's going on with Suarez? And is he going to be able to keep up? And then what does he do? He goes out at Sears Point and he wins convincingly, easily. Drivers that overcome things. These are the stories. These are the things that get people to identify with these drivers. These are the things that happen. And it's more than some reality show. It's more than, even footage that we're seeing in the Race of the Championship show. Now, we talked about this last week. I think that show is very well produced. I like that it features how cool visually the sport is. That's another aspect of it that the broadcasts need to get back to. But still, the storylines of the people within the context of their racing career, not just who they are as people. Like, that's cool. I like that they're doing that. That's fine. But, we get a lot of that on social media. That's almost a little too easy these days. What you need to do is you need to show their history. You need to actually watch the races. You need to actually understand enough of what's happening in multiple races over an extended period of time. These highlight clips on YouTube don't do enough. You can't just watch stage 1 winner, stage 2 winner, race winner, victory lane. That's it. It's like, no. It's a little bit more than that. And that's what the sport kind of needs to get back to. I don't know who needs to hear this, but I think just a lot of them do. I think it needs to be kind of a realization here. And I think what happened with the Ty Majeski thing should be another example of that. And I know they weren't booing him, because they didn't like him. They were booing him because he didn't do a burnout. But you need to understand why he didn't, And for all I know, maybe he went out there and was, talking more about doing a Polish victory lap one day. But I don't know. But that's the other aspect of it, too. Looking at the results from the Truck Series race there. Zane Smith in the second spot. Great rally from 35th on the grid. The finished second spot. Parker Kligerman in third. Another great storyline, and to his credit, great interview he gave after that race, talking about how much he wants to give Charlie Henderson a win. I wish that these broadcasts picked up on that and hopefully do a segment talking about how Henderson Motorsports has been part of NASCAR for decades, how guys like Rick Wilson winning for the Xfinity series programs, Brad Teague, drivers like that ran that same 75 with the same Food Country logo. I mean, their pit box cover still has the old, the number graphic from the time that they ran those those other cars back then, those purple, red, and white cars way back in the day. They're very much a throwback to this and to kind of understand that program. And understand what Parker's talking about when he mentions that. I think that would be huge. But a great run regardless there. Third place finish for him. Grant Enfinger, Matt Crafton round out your top 5. Back of the field, Spencer Boyd. I don't know what's going on with him lately. I know he's another driver that's got a very popular fan base. He's another guy, reminds me of like Joe Graff Jr. in the Xfinity series. I've seen this from posting some articles about these drivers that, a lot of his fans are like, oh man, he had another rough run. I know Spencer in these last few weeks, it seems like that 12 team has just had all kinds of just bad luck. In this particular case here, being eliminated with crash damage very early in the race, dropping him out after 25 laps. You hope that things could kind of turn around in that program. Certainly the fact that, he was able to pull off a win in recent memory, at least that helps, the Talladega win. But the Young's Motorsports team, they're really trying to kind of get things going. I also wish that there would have been a bit more mention with Jesse Little, the fact that he made his last start. Yes, this is a driver that hasn't had tremendous amounts of success, but he's been at it since about 2015, 2014, son of Chad Little, who himself never won a Cup Series race, ran for many years in the John Deere car. One of the most iconic paint schemes, one in which Jesse himself ran a throwback of not too long ago. It would have been nice if more was mentioned about that. I don't know if it was mentioned more in the pre-race show. I didn't really see that. Hopefully it was. But him coming up rather unexpectedly midway through this week, saying that this truck race was going to be his last ever NASCAR start. He's made starts in all three of the top series, and I guess is looking to do something different in the sport. I'm glad he says he's still going to be at the track and still involved with the sport somehow. I don't know if he's still going to be working with the team, the Young's team or something like that. We heard very similar out of Spencer Gallagher a couple of years ago, looking at doing something else with GMS. And of course, look at what's happened with that program since then, getting up into the Cup Series with the Petty team. I mean, they've gone on to massive things. And you know, of course, Grant Enfinger is still very much a factor on their Truck Series program. So hopefully something works out there well for him. I definitely want to extend, my congratulations to him. I know that he had a rough night out there listening to some of the radio traffic there. Finished back in the 25th spot, the number 02. But definitely want to mention that at the same time there. Bailey Curry, talked about him a little bit in the Xfinity race with the 11th place finish. He finished 15th in the Truck Series race, and I believe he had some damage on that truck too. So he recovered from that very nicely to get a decent run. Caden Honeycutt, the 13th spot. I don't think I mentioned him in the article. Great run for him. Very few starts. He made his debut driving for G2G Racing back at Martinsville this past spring. Haven't seen too much out of him, but that was a fantastic run for him in that on-point effort. We'd seen some good runs out of them. I think when Brennan Poole drove for him before, seems like Brennan Poole, whatever he jumps into, even if it's like a really underfunded effort, they can just get the most out of it. But definitely Caden getting in there and getting a good run. I was impressed with John Hunter Nemechek. Thought it was strange that they came into that race. He gets in that wreck, and then they run the backup truck, and they don't even run the same sponsors on the truck. I guess they didn't have the decals ready or couldn't put them on there or anything, but recovered very nicely to a 12th place finish with that. I know that that's not, as good as that team's accustomed to running, but definitely, John Hunter is a scrappier driver than people give him credit for. I mean, remember, of course, he drove all those years with his father's team and with Joe Nemechek and the Nemco Motorsports thing. It's unfortunate we didn't get to see them race against each other again in the Xfinity race at Daytona when qualifying got washed out. But I think that pedigree from having raced at Nemco Motorsports all those years and having to work his way back into things, I think that was the best part of that there. So good storylines along the way. But of course, again, Ty Majeski, congratulations on that win, leading 45 laps of the Uno 200. Presented by Ohio Logistics there in the race there. So a pretty packed weekend. I mean, really thinking about it. Gosh, between all the things that have happened in those races, haven't really talked about the ARCA race, but competitive affair on that side too. I believe, who was it on that one? Was it Sammy Smith on that one in the ARCA series? I didn't really watch that one there. But we have, still just a solid weekend here. Do we have a call? I've had the chat covered up on my screen for a while, so if something really crazy happened, I apologize. I haven't reacted to it quite yet here. Let's see. Look out onto the garage. I think these are still older updates here from Hawkers. He posted the race results a while ago. It does show steering is the reason out again for Truex. That was confirmed on the NASCAR report. Earlier in here, Truex out with steering issues. Ty Gibbs listed out with steering issues. Engine failure for Kyle Busch. Accident for both Stenhouse and Bowman. A damaged vehicle policy for Austin Dillon. They did take a while there working on the suspension on pit road. He's listed out under the DVP instead of the wreck there. Logano listed out with suspension issues. That seems consistent with the problems that they were having, similar to Blaney. Might be a bit longer here for the article to you guys tonight. Like I said, I usually write parts of it during the race here, but this was definitely a race that was more challenging to do so. So let's see. Do we have any updates on it? Okay, I don't think... Yeah, it's 34 minutes ago we had the update on that. I guess they're still piecing the cars together to really get that too. So we'll do some more damaged vehicle policy for Ty Dillon. I don't think so. I only see one DVP on here. 42 car. No, steering issues for Dillon. So yeah, add him to the list. There's another driver. Wow, man. The steering racks, the flat tires, and the loose wheels. My goodness. I just you can tell just looking at the results here how scattered everything is on the results. But not to say Chris Buescher didn't earn it, though, because he's absolutely been one of the best drivers on the outside of the cut line here. Good to see for sure. Okay, so we'll do some trivia questions here. If you guys have any other questions from anything this weekend, don't hesitate to ask here in the chat here, the Cup Series, Xfinity, or Truck Series races here. I think there's a lot to really look at the same time, but that's another one to talk about. Let's see here. What's the point of this Roval or the Indy road course? Yeah, I don't know either, Joseph, but that's that's a whole other discussion. We'll have the Roval here soon enough. So we'll do some trivia questions here. I don't know if we'll wait for inspection results here or not. We'll probably do this for maybe another 20 minutes or so. But again, if you guys have any other questions from the action or anything else I haven't covered, definitely let me know. Oh, let me get the super chats here as well. I want to make sure you guys get your deals on this too. Joseph N. Schneiderman, thank you for the super chat here. Yay, Polish victory laps. Yes, absolutely. Very cool. I wish that would, again, I think that this is just, I hope the networks cover that a bit better. And they got some time to kind of check all that. So I think that'll be another one to kind of look at too. So there's that. And Beast of Metal, thank you for your super chat as well. Both TV partners are garbage. I blame them. I'm reading this, by the way. I'm not saying this necessarily. I blame them and their shoddy camera work and positioning for Road America's terrible TV ratings, which NASCAR is using as their excuse to justify killing it for a race no one else wants. Yes, thank you for mentioning it. I actually do agree with that. Yeah, I think that, I think we've had just absolutely incredible racing. If you put the racing from this year into any other year with any different broadcast group, it would be getting way more attention. And people would be like, oh my gosh, this is just absolutely incredible. And maybe the broadcasters will really rise to that level. But we're just not seeing it. And that's unfortunate. And I think the effect of tracks like Road America, which did put on a good race, our William Saki was out there covering that. And I thought he did a fine job showing what was happening behind the scenes. Just talking about the other drivers that were in the field, like Loris Hessemans was interesting. It would have been nice to have it covered a bit. I don't know why they don't do what they do at Watkins Glen to station reporters out there and have a more, exciting aspect to it. I know it's a very big track. I know there's all that, but I mean, it's a world-class road course. It should be deserving of a bit more respect rather than being kicked to the curb for the Chicago street course race next year. And I know that's exciting too, but it would be nice to be able to have both of them. Thankfully, we're going to have the Xfinity Series still there next year. I'm glad they didn't lose that date altogether because I think they have a wonderful atmosphere at that track. It seems like a great, relaxed kind of picnic atmosphere out there. And then you got the race going through it and just, really competitive event there. That'd be great to see. I think we had good races there the last couple of years. But that's definitely another one to kind of, to really talk about there at the same time. But thank you for mentioning that, Beast of Metal. I definitely agree on that for sure. All right. Let's see. There we go. Oh, yes. So for the trivia categories here, again, for those of you who are new to this one, we're doing the late 90s Trivial Pursuit deal here. We have categories. Go ahead and mention in which category you'd like on there for that, and we'll go ahead and do that. The NASCAR hauler might be busy pulling cars to R&D, apparently, with Bob's photo, says Irvin Alvarado. Okay, thank you for the heads up on that. Wow. Okay, well, we'll see what's going on that. It says steering, not power steering, Death Killer. Yeah, I saw your on that. And yes, I haven't heard anything on inspection too. So we'll see on that. So again, the categories again on here are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Go ahead and mention in the chat which category you'd like, and we'll do some questions from that as we kind of wrap up the show here for this evening. I appreciate you guys staying tuned. Wow, we still have 80 people in here, and it's past midnight on the East Coast. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. I know this is a pretty crazy weekend here for sure. So I think it'll be, we'll see what's going on coming up here. Again, the categories are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild cards. So go ahead and mention in the chat which category you'd like on that. So we'll find out. just pull this up here in the meantime. Let's see. Yeah, so that's a lap 354 that we had the final last change of the day. Very unusual. Okay, here we go. Here's another one, too. Bob Pocker is tweeting this 3 minutes ago. For anyone wondering, as far as the 22 and 23 dropping out and potentially helping teammates, NASCAR's lead technical inspector, checked out both cars and determined the damage was legitimate. So again, I think in the case of Logano in particular, the fact that he pulled up to exactly the same box as Blaney, and they were jacking the car up. They were trying to fix that suspension. He was on pit road for a long time, but that was the same thing that happened with Blaney too. I'll admit when I first saw it, I'm thinking that's a little weird. It's especially the timing of it. There's that. As to Ty Gibbs, the damage being legitimate, I'm not sure about that. He was within 4 laps of catching and passing Kyle Busch. And his teammate Bubba Wallace was able to stay out there after having the same issue. But at the same time, again, I don't know if the same part was replaced on his car like it was on Bubba Wallace. Maybe they was trying to make it, just make do, and he pulled off the track there. The timing is more opportune in that particular case, but, I think in that, again, I'm not sure if there's enough there to really warrant more of a discussion. Now, watch, this will end up aging really badly, and there's going to be a big discussion about this later. But from Pockra's tweet here 4 minutes ago, I'm not sure if that's going to be the case here. So we'll certainly see what happens there. Let's see. Nope, no other updates on Pockra's page here. Best Bristol race since 2018. Yeah, probably have to agree, Andrew. It's definitely pretty consistent on that one. Let's see. Yeah, power steering on Toyotas. I think Jesse's going to be a team owner death killer. I don't know. That's a good question. It could happen. I mean, anything's possible. I'm glad he's still going to be involved in the sport somehow. I mean, his father, I think Chad Little's still some kind of technical inspector or something in the sport. I know there's a lot of technical inspectors that had a lot of hands-on knowledge. Tony Glover is still involved in the sport and has been since his time when he worked with Morgan McClure. So that's another one to kind of look at. Let's see. But yeah, that'll be interesting. Alrighty. Where are we leading with the categories here? Let's see. Whoop, hang on. Let me pull this back. Feel like I'm missing something else on this. Okay, no, that's the same pictures. I'm gonna get my notes out here. Okay. David Green was official. Yeah, exactly. There's another one too. Very good point, Andrew. Let's see. Alrighty. Yeah, the evil black hauler. There you go. Death killer, yeah. I don't know what's going on with that, but I mean, we'll see if we have any other updates on what's going on there. See a couple for wild card. Is that the category we got here? Definitely let me know, Beast of Metal, if we have a lead on this. I don't know if we have enough on that. Alrighty. What was this on here? Oh, okay. Hang on. See afterwards. Last bro just got back from work, so we're gonna be watching the race here afterwards. You didn't see the thing earlier, so I'm not spoiling it. Okay. Alrighty. Counting down that. Okay. It looks like it might be wild card. I think it might be the leader. Let me check my notes on here. I was going to check that too. Yes. Here's another one I want to mention. First of all, I didn't want to lead off on this. I want to say a big thanks to DNF Racers on Twitter. If you're here in the chat here, definitely say hey for sure. He did a fantastic job last week. was sending some pictures of the last place finishers at Kansas. I thought he did a great job on that. You got the bottom 5 for ARCA and other things there too. I always love seeing any pictures people share from the track. Definitely, I didn't mention that last week. I want to definitely mention it on this week's show here. So definitely thank you to DNF Racers at DNF Racers on Twitter. He provided some great pictures. And big thanks to Austin this weekend, who sent some more pictures from Bristol in turns 1 and 2. He had a great view of the race. I'm actually kind of looking at some of the other pictures that he sent here too. So we'll have some more updates on that. But big thanks, again, anybody at the track, and that goes, if anybody's there, we only do a couple races a year. We're looking to kind of add some more to our schedule. We have, of course, our William Saki and Ben Schneider that write for the website. They've covered some races in person as well. We can't be everywhere, but fortunately, there's a lot of people that love following the last place battles as well, and getting just pictures of rare paint schemes out there. I love seeing that stuff. So, my DMs are always open on that. Same thing on Facebook there too. So if you guys are into that, that's definitely there as well. Let's see. Matt Mills, definitely sending out thoughts to him as well. He's been out of the race in the Xfinity series for the last couple of weeks. Garrett Smithley was in his place. Kansas, BJ McLeod was this week. Apparently he's recovering from flu-like symptoms. Hope he's feeling better as well. Maybe coming back this next week in Texas. We'll find out on that point. But that's going to be definitely another thing to kind of talk about further down the road there. I saw this come up in the chat there too about the Xfinity series itself coming to Sears Point and not the Truck Series. It's a little disappointing to lose the Truck Series. I thought they put on a great show. It was fun to see the trucks kind of really struggle with turn 11 and fight their way around there. I think especially the Truck Series history as being kind of a West Coast venue. It was cool seeing them back out here. Hopefully it's something that maybe they switch off on or something. But if the weekend could extend it all to have all 3 series there, I think that'd be amazing. I'd hate to see us lose the West Series, though. Hopefully we can have all 4 series and have just a massive weekend, maybe extended into Thursday. I think that'd be the best case scenario there. But hopefully we can get it. Because I think, again, Sears Point's another world-class track. Everybody wants to come out here and visit San Francisco and drink the wine and enjoy the weather. Why not have it be even longer? I don't see any problem with that. So, but yeah, I'd love to see the Xfinity guys tackle it. I think that's going to be great next year. I think they're going to put on a good show. Love to see teams like Johnny Davis's program and Mike Harmon's that, haven't had a chance to compete out here yet. Love to see them get the chance at it there too. So that'll be cool. I do know logistically it's going to be a concern. And I applaud again, Sebastian on Twitter there talking about the issues of going directly from Portland to Sears Point and the demands that these cars are put under on road courses. This is something I think the teams could certainly comment on much more in the sanctioning body when they plan this stuff out. I'm sure the sanctioning body is thinking, okay, well, this is great. We got all these, races grouped together. But in that case, it's a little bit different. So hopefully something else works out on that end. Because I think I think it'll still be a good show, but I think it's going to be, these teams are going to be stretched a little bit, especially since it's still halfway through the year. So we'll see. Are we on 6 for wild card? No other categories, more than 1 vote. Beast of Metal. Okay, yeah. Thank you for totaling that up, Beast of Metal. We'll go ahead and go into some wild card questions here to wrap up for the evening here. Alrighty. So, alrighty. First question for the evening. What year, here we go. First question, what year did a snowstorm delay Atlanta's Winston Cup season finale? What year did a snowstorm delay Atlanta's Winston Cup season finale? That is our first question. Alrighty. Checking out the chat here on the freeways. I'm afraid I'm not as knowledgeable on that. We went through a lot of that on the East Coast from Ontario down to Darlington in 2019, but I think that's the only time that we've tried any of those roads out there. What year did a snowstorm delay Atlanta's Winston Cup season finale? Yeah. See, I know some of you are thinking one thing, but it seems to be a different one. What year did a snowstorm delay Atlanta's Winston Cup season finale? Okay, I see 78, I see 89, 93, 94, 87. What year did a snowstorm delay Atlanta's Winston Cup season finale? And the answer is 1991. 91. Now that I'm not aware of. I know that they ran it, but I did not know it was delayed by snow. I mean, the 93 spring race, a lot of you guessed that, and that's a good guess, but that's the spring race. I'm not aware of the 91 Atlanta race being delayed. I mean, it was a season finale, so I mean, they could really run it pretty much any week, but was it delayed a week? It was scheduled, it ran on the 17th after the Phoenix race is on the 3rd. I don't know if it was scheduled on the 10th and it got moved, but that's what I'm seeing on the results here. So that would be interesting. Yeah, 91 is the answer. Alrighty. Here we go. Next question. What driver hung a Rembrandt in his log cabin home? Uh-oh, we have tech is complete? Oh, hang on. I'll read this again here for you guys. What driver hung a Rembrandt in his log cabin home? Do we have a call? We have a call, it sounds like. That'd be good to get that on the stream here. Alrighty, there it is. Cup Tech complete, no issues. According to Bob Pockris on here, Chris Buescher is the winner, or Christopher Buescher, whichever you prefer. Round of 12 is set. Harvick, Bell, and Byron cars are going to R&D. So again, congratulations to Chris Buescher. Unfortunately, it's going to be a last place finish for Martin Truex Jr. So a Truex article coming for you guys later tonight. But Chris Buescher, your winner. He has now 2 Cup Series wins, and the entire first round was not won by a single playoff driver. Absolutely crazy. So we'll see how all of that shakes out. I guess we haven't talked about like the drivers eliminated from the playoffs here. What was the situation there? We can get back onto that. And Busch will finish 34th. Race results. Briscoe, Cindric. So Reddick, Kyle Busch, Austin Dillon, and Kevin Harvick eliminated. I don't know if that's everybody's four. I think Reddick seemed like he was going to hopefully make a chance at actually getting to the final 4 there, but just having bad luck at the worst time. Austin Dillon, too. It seems like that's happened constantly to him. I know there was that one year he made it to the Roval and had problems. And then, of course, Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick just had an absolutely disastrous first round here. So we'll see how that all shakes out. Hang on. Let me read the question again. I know it's a little confusing. What driver hung a Rembrandt in his log cabin home? That is the question. All right. Yeah, Rembrandt. So a Rembrandt painting. So basically, what driver hung a Rembrandt painting in his log cabin home? I know that's a couple strange details, but basically he put an expensive painting in his log cabin. So I guess it's for Junior Johnson and Dick Trickle and Cale Yarborough. Yes, it's official. 19 different winners. That too. Bill Elliott. Eric Estep is upset that Reddick was a championship pick. Again, yeah, that wasn't a bad pick. I mean, you know, especially how good he's been in the Xfinity series. Just didn't work out. Last Pro was thinking he'd make the Final Four at least. Alrighty. What driver hung a Rembrandt in his log cabin home? The answer is Dale Earnhardt. Dale Earnhardt. Dale Earnhardt is the correct answer. Dale Earnhardt tends to be the right answer for a lot of things, but there you go. Yeah, these are some hard questions tonight. Working on hard mode here. Next question here. Who ran the fastest IROC event ever in 1992 at a speed of 191.722 miles per hour? Who ran the fastest IROC event ever in 1992 at 191.722 miles per hour? Yeah, this is definitely... Oh, so nobody guessed that one either. Wow. These are kind of tricky questions. The snowed out Atlanta race and the Rembrandt and the log cabin. Dale seems more like a Jackson Pollock to me. Wasp of Doom. Yeah, good point. Maybe. Yeah, Earnhardt is the correct answer on the last one. Here's to get the question again. Who ran the fastest IROC event ever in 1992 at 191.722 miles per hour? We got a lot of all-stars coming up on the list here. Earnhardt and Mark Martin and Al Unser Jr. and Mark Martin. Okay, we'll see. Read it one more time. Who ran the fastest IROC event ever in 1992 at 191.722 miles per hour? Alrighty, and the answer is the late, great Davey Allison. Davey Allison is the correct answer, at least as of the late 1990s. That was the fastest IROC race ever run. Davey Allison, which I would assume probably Talladega. I mean, certainly at that speed, it would have to be Daytona or Talladega. The fastest IROC event ever in 1992 at 191.722 miles per hour. Alrighty. Okay, so we're going to do one more question here, folks. I know it's a later show here, so we're going to wrap this up. Last question for the evening, folks. Here we go. What active NASCAR Winston Cup driver, again, as of the 1990s, what active NASCAR Winston Cup driver builds model boats in his spare time? Didn't see that one coming, did you? What active NASCAR Winston Cup driver builds model boats in his spare time? Joseph, did you guess Davey just right on time? There you go. That worked out. Yeah, you nailed that one. Big save. Joe knows. Exactly. Model boats. Yes, correct. B-O-A-T-S. I don't know if the microphone is picking it up correctly here. Don't worry about it, Joseph. We're cool. Thank you again to the moderators, Beast of Metal in particular, for keeping an eye on the chat. I hope it wasn't. I saw it was getting a little crazy there earlier, but I appreciate you keeping an eye on it. What active NASCAR Winston Cup driver builds model boats in his spare time? Model boats. Lake Speed. There's a good guess. Vasily Podkolzin. Jeffrey Bodine. Dave Marcus. Lake Speed. What active NASCAR Winston Cup driver builds model boats in his spare time? Give you a few more seconds there to guess on that one. Make sure I didn't miss any super chats from earlier there. I think we're caught up. Yeah, we got Michaels on that. That's good. Okay. Alrighty. I'm not going to get to this. I had good luck twice tonight. I'm not pressing it. Yeah, I get you. Steve Park, Aurelio Lopez, Rusty Wallace. Okay, here we go. What active NASCAR Winston Cup driver, as of the 90s, builds model boats in his spare time? The answer is Derek Cope. Well, I guess I should have known the answer to that. I honestly didn't. That's never come up in any of our interviews. I'm going to have to ask him about that. Well, that's embarrassing. Okay, well, there you go. Derek Cope builds model boats in his spare time. I had not seen boat one in his hauler. Okay. What active NASCAR World Cup driver builds model boats? Okay, well, hate to end it on that, but I guess I have another interview question to ask. Just when I think the book's done, it pulls me back in. Okay, that's fine. We'll figure that out. So, hey, yeah, I'll have to, I know I got somebody to text tomorrow. That's for sure. So that'll do it for the show tonight, folks. Thank you. I think that's a fitting way to wrap up what's been a crazy week at Bristol. That'll be, the show here for this week. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. At Last Car on Brock is Twitter. Patreon.com/Last Car on Brock is the Patreon. Of course, there's this channel for other content. We got more videos working on in the moment. Don't have any new updates on that, but we hope to very soon. Those of you in the Patreon will see that first. And our next show is going to be after next week's race in Texas. I may not be doing the Xfinity race live. I have another thing I'm doing next Saturday, but we'll be doing the show after Sunday's race to cover what happens in the Lone Star State. And yeah, we'll find out what happens from here. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Have a safe week. Have a great week, everyone. And I'll see you guys next week.